Hey everybody, it's Cindy, and today I have a video for you using the Best Thoughts Hostess stamp set from Stampin' Up. And I am going to do a couple of techniques on this card. I'm going to do a embossed watercolor background, so the sentiment, it's right here, will be up in this upper corner, will be embossed, and then I will do some watercoloring over the top of it using the Distress ink. And then I'm going to use a tip that I got from Amy R on Prairie Paper and Ink, and that is to go over, once you're done with the watercoloring, to go over this with an iron and take the embossing actually off of the paper, and it leaves a matte finish for the sentiment. So I'm going to try that. I haven't ever done it yet, other than just a little test strip. Seems to work pretty well. I'm going to try it on an actual card. This is going to be a card for an anniversary party we're going to in a couple of weeks. I thought that was a good sentiment for 25 years. And then I'm going to use this hydrangea stamp as well. So this will be down here, but it's actually stamped. I've already stamped it onto another sheet of watercolor paper, and we're going to color that in. And that's going to be popped up a little bit off of the card. But first I'm going to do that background with the blue and the embossing. And then the whole thing is going to go on the back, on this Doodlebug textured cardstock. That'll be my cardstock, or my card base. And I'll also use some cracked pistachio distress ink, some barn door distress ink, and then this will be the sky background that I'm going to do over the embossing. So should be a fairly quick card, but I'm going to try that new technique with the embossing to get rid of the actual media for the embossing after I watercolor over the top of it. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with the embossing. So I'm going to take my EK Success embossing tool, and it just distributes powder really evenly over the card. I only need it up in that corner, but I don't want to take any chances of anything sticking anywhere else when I heat it up. So there's that. You could also use, Stampin' Up has an embossing buddy. It's a little powder pouch. I like this one just because you can refill it. I'm going to use some Versamark on my sentiment, and I'm going to lay my sentiment down first and get it lined up because I want it pretty straight on the card. That looks pretty good. It's lined up with the lines on my grid block here, and I'm going to line, I'm going to line this up on one of the lines of my work surface there. I'm going to go ahead and get the ink on my Versamark stamp pad onto my stamp. That should be good. And then just so that I get it lined up correctly, I know I'm going to need about that much room for the flower, more or less. I think I'm going to have it at a slight angle. So I'm going to put this down about right there and then just try to line it up as straight as possible using the grid lines there. So that should be pretty close. There we go. I don't know if you can see it there at all. We'll go ahead and get the embossing powder on it. I'm going to grab a coffee filter. This is another one of, I think it's Amy R that does it too. This is the coffee filter to catch your embossing powder when you're embossing something. It catches all the leftover and you can just funnel it back in, and anything that doesn't funnel just gets kind of stuck to that filter paper. So I'm using clear embossing powder from American Craft. It's the Zing embossing powder. I'm going to go ahead and funnel that back in. Okay, put that out of the way. I want to make sure that I get everything exactly where I want it, so I have an old paintbrush here that I'm going to use to brush off anything that should not be where it is. Even sometimes using the powder tool, sometimes you get just a little bit in weird places and you want to make sure you get that off. I'm going to flick it a couple of times to make sure everything is off that should be off. You probably still can't see that. Okay, and now I'm going to use This is just a piece of cardstock that's laminated. to use that to kind of smush down my background because I want a watercolor background. Over here, I'm going to smush down some Distress ink, and this is Peacock Feathers. And I'm going to spritz it with just a tiniest little bit of water because I want a pretty saturated background. And then I'm just going to start smushing this in to my watercolor paper to give me a nice mottled background, kind of a sky for the flower to be up against. And I don't want it to be perfect. I do want that light in places, dark in others, but I want to make sure that I get a good ink coverage over the whole sentiment. The rest of it can be mottled and splotchy and all that, but definitely over the sentiment. And I'm actually going to take, just to make sure that sentiment gets a good coverage, I'm going to take my watercolor brush and go into a couple of places that I see didn't get perfectly hit. The rest of it doesn't have to be perfect, but around the sentiment kind of has to get good full coverage. So that's drying pretty quickly. I might go back over this part just a little bit more to give it a little bit more contrast when I put my flower over the top of it. So a little bit more color, a little tiny bit more water, and then I'm just going to kind of squish some more down here. I think some of the card videos I've seen, people call this smushing. It's a pretty technical term. I like it. I like the effect that you get. It's pretty simple, but it's definitely a high impact. A little more smushing. Kind of like that. So that's going to be a really nice contrast when I get the nice bright colors of my hydrangea up against it. So I'm going to get this out of the way and wipe it off so it can sit off to the side here and dry. There we go. Okay, so that's my sentiment, and I'm gonna let this dry while we start coloring the hydrangea, and then we'll come back and do that iron trick to get rid of that embossing powder so that it's not shiny, it's more of a matte finish. But first I'm going to set this off to the side to let it dry. We will color this hydrangea, and I'm just going to do a watercolor again. In order to keep this video from going on forever and ever while I colored this focal image for my card, I sped up the video here to about 500%, so it's going to look like I am really fast at this, but I'm not. It took me a while. I kept it really simple. I used 2 different colors of Distress ink, Barn Door for the red and Cracked Pistachio for the green, the leaves. And I did not use any other colors than that. So instead of using separate colors for the shadows, you know, 2 different colors of red, 2 different colors of green, or 3 different colors, whatever, I kept it really simple, and I just added less water as I added in more shadows. So I go in with a basic wash that's really light on both the petals and the leaves, and then I start going back in with the same color with a little less water. So less water equals more pigment equals richer color, and I just did that on both the leaves and the petals, and I let the red dry a little bit in between there, so did some on the red, did some on the green, and then went back again into the red because I wanted to get a little bit richer yet, and I wanted to do it with almost no water. So the final stage on the red petals is almost 100% pigment with very, very little water, and that gives it that look that hydrangeas have. As you probably know, they're almost monochromatic, so they will be white and lavender and purple, or they'll be red and pink and a really, really light shade of almost a salmony color. And that's kind of the look I was going for. And then plug in my iron. And it'll take just a few seconds to heat up. And while that's happening, we're going to put some foam dot on the back of this. Let me get this out of the way so you can see it. On the back of this, so that we can pop it up on the front of the card. These are not sticking very well. Let me get a different set. I'll try these. Okay. Just going to place several around the outside. I don't want it to show from the outside of the card, but I also don't want to get too flat or to not stick. And I think I'm actually going to have to trim this down. For the stem. So one there, one there. So now you won't be able to see the foam from the outside, but you can see where it is on there. And I probably need one more on that stem. Okay, stuck to my finger. That didn't work. Let's try again. That one can go right there. Yeah, so that'll work. That'll keep it nice and popped up against the card. Now I think we're ready to iron. Let me see. Yep, it's ready. Okay, so I'm going to take my background here and we're just going to iron this part, and then we'll kind of flatten the rest of it since it did warp a little bit. I'm going to put a piece of copy paper, and this is actually a double layer, right over the top here. Peel this back. Okay. And I'm just going to put some pressure, but keep moving it, and you'll start to see right here kind of the outline of the embossing that we use show up. And I'm just going to flatten this out while I'm working on it, but keep it moving. And you'll be able to see when you can see all of the letters plainly through there. It's ready to pull up. And you just want to check it and make sure all of it came up, and if you think there's anything shiny still left, just move it to a different spot on the card and do it again. And anything that's left over will definitely come up. And you're left with a really cute, flat, matte sentiment on this card. And now I'm just going to lay a fresh sheet over it and kind of flatten this down a little bit more. Iron the watercolor paper. And it won't work perfectly, but it'll work pretty well. There you go. Now it's pretty flat. And you got that great matte sentiment. So let me unplug my iron here. And now it's time to add this to the front of the card. But first, I need to trim it down just a little bit. So I'm going to grab my paper trimmer. And it's going to be a tall, skinny card. So I'm going to go 4 1/4 this way. Okay. Which means that this needs to be 4 inches this way. So I need to trim it down just a little bit. So I'm going to trim down the side that doesn't have the cinnamon on it. Like that. That's kind of cute. I might put that inside. And then 4¼ by 5½, so this should be 5¼ and that will fit nicely on the card base. And I'll go ahead and use my bone folder and this instead of having to get out my scoreboard. I'll just score this at 5½. And then I will fold my card base just like that. And that'll be ready to attach, and then the flower goes right up over the top of it. And I'm thinking I'm going to adhere this down with foam tape. And then on the inside, I'm just going to put plain Nina Solar white cardstock on the inside, and then I'm going to stamp the flower again, but just in black and white so that I have room to write on it. I think that will be it. And stamp my hydrangea one more time in black and white using Ranger Archival. And I'm going to stamp it so it runs a little bit off, I think. Right there. Just like that. So now I can just write right inside there. And now we can assemble the card. This will be my inside. I like the way it looks like it's kind of running off the page. There you go. Just like that. So there's the inside of the card. And now on the outside, I'm going to use some of my Scotch 3M foam tape. Bring it down pretty close to the edge, but it's not going to show on the edge. Should be pretty close. Okay. There. A little bit more. Right here. So this is going to be popped up on foam tape. Give it a little bit of dimension that way. And then this will be right on the front. Just like that. Peel this off. Mount this right on the front. I need to get it upside down. It'll work better that way. There we go. There's the front. And then I've just got to peel off all of the little pieces off the foam squares here. There. So I want some of the blue to show in the background. And there it is. There's the inside of the card. There's the outside of the card. This was a fast card, even with the ironing and waiting for everything to heat up. 20 minutes maybe. If I wouldn't talk so much, it'd probably go faster. I will have a picture at the end if you want to see close-ups of it. And it will be posted on my blog as well. I hope you enjoyed this card. This is from some supplies from Stampin' Up! And from my stash. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments down below, and I will definitely answer them as soon as possible. If you liked my video and found it helpful or informative or interesting or anything else, please give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for future crafty videos. Thanks and have a good night.